Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I came across these interviews a couple of days ago and thought I'd share them here with you all. This is in relation to the Mike Bickle of IHOP and the scandal that had erupted last year in relation to a likely abuse of power and misconduct. In these interviews they discuss what had happened just before, during and afterwards, and how things were handled and how things should have been handled better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Until the next time, God's rich blessings on you all.
I'm here with Jennifer Roberts and Elizabeth Herder. Both of you have been part of International House of Prayer for many, many years. Jennifer, from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
One of the questions that's come out of this is the power differential between Mike and the girls. You were friends with many of these women that are bringing forth these allegations. Tell us a little bit about the context, because people go, these girls, it was a consensual relationship. Talk to that.
Well, I think when we first arrived, we came in August '98, so before the House of Prayer started. Elizabeth did. You were around that time because we were students together, and the atmosphere, the buzz in the whole community was almost like Mike Bickle was a god. And because I didn't have really context of him before arriving, it threw me off a little bit, like how people almost got weak in the knees when he would walk in the room, and it was just odd. But observing the impact that he had on people first was shocking to me, but then I also gave into it as well. It started to impact me as well, where I started to care a lot about what he thought. I started to want to be, I wanted to be one of the faithful ones. I wanted to be one of the true ones. And seeing his impact, and I was a 29-year-old woman, like the frontal part of my brain was developed, but he always had a cluster of young women that adored him. And I think when you're in that kind of dynamic, you really don't have the ability to separate yourself. And so there's that, it's like a therapist, it's like a doctor, there's a power that they have that you become vulnerable and they matter so deeply to you and have the ability to distort and twist and manipulate in a way that a normal friend wouldn't. And then you throw in the age difference, you throw in the stature, you throw in, he knows the Bible so much, he prays 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. And you just start to almost go, wow, he knows better. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My observation during that time, it's interesting. To be honest, it was probably more of jealousy because I actually was markedly not in that inner circle of girls, but I noticed it and I knew it was happening, and I would hear about and I knew some of my friends were in it. So I knew about like that Mike would come over for pizza nights just with the girls and watch movies. And I was a little bit younger than Jen, and I was kind of in that in-between place where because this incredible man of God is doing it, I figured there must be this just really neat, unusual way that you're allowed to relate. And I just was maybe on the outside of that. But I, at the same time, was always very beloved to Mike, at least in my own mind. I believed that Mike loved me very much. I believed that he was a huge fan. He had nicknames for me, appropriate. And one of them was the Rainmaker. I loved the affirmation that I got working with Mike and within the leadership team. And so just part of my own story is that I felt incredible loyalty. I'm not someone, I don't have a story of Mike victimizing me or hurting me in that way. And so when I entered into the way that I've been advocating, it was in mourning and tears and shock when I realized that my friend, my leader and my friend was not gonna do the right thing. It was almost childlike. I'm not a very childlike person, but it almost was childlike because I thought this terrible thing is happening. Mike must not know how bad. I'm going to go tell him, and then he's going to do the godly thing, and it will all get better. And when my husband and I started to go on that journey, we very quickly found out that he was not going to do that. And it was extremely disillusioning, because I went in fully trusting.
Right. I think there was a level of believing that he almost didn't have the ability to be sexually inappropriate because so many of his inappropriate behaviors were done in broad daylight. Like I saw him play footsies with girls under the table, and I thought, that is really, really stupid, but Mike, he doesn't get it. He didn't get that that's inappropriate. So I gave him a pass on so many things because I thought, that's just Mike, he does stupid things. Now I realize that what was done in the daytime was to really hide what was really done in the dark. And so that is terrifying now, to think of all the things that I observed and I didn't say anything because I gave him not just the benefit of the doubt, but I didn't actually think he was capable of doing something like that. And taking advantage of the trust that he was given to his congregants, to his students, to his research team, to these cluster of young women that really were faithful and loyal and adored him, and he betrayed that trust for his own pleasure.
So this is a clergyman with a duty of care over his flock, and you've talked to a number of these Jane Does that have brought stories. I mean, do you think a consensual affair is an appropriate term to class that relationship?
100% no. Now, I'm not an expert, so you're talking to Jennifer, not some expert with a PhD, but absolutely not. Because, even my own story, I was groomed in high school by a football coach. It didn't go physical, but I remember the power that he had over me in the grooming process and the little steps that I was starting to take to receive his affirmation. And I blew the whistle when I saw that it was happening to much younger girls. I went, okay, I'm 18. I'm not going to say this is anything. Okay, I'm smarter than that. You think you're so smart at 18. But when I saw him maneuvering with a 14-year-old, then I went to the principal. And several of us young girls were sitting around the principal's office telling our story, and we had all been manipulated by this football coach whose end game was to have a sexual relationship with us. And there was no way that was consensual. There was no way that I had the ability to say no in that moment, because of the trust that happens with a teacher and a student, the way a trust happens with a pastor and a congregant. And so in this particular situation we're talking about, there wasn't just a power differential, there was also such a significant age gap. But that doesn't mean that if there's not an age gap, that power differential isn't there. And so no, not consensual.
So you've been through this yourself in terms of moving from this kind of intimate abuse relationship into actually blowing a whistle. How hard is that?
It's so hard. I think for women, period, to come forward with any kind of sexual allegation, the reason it's 92% of the stories are true is because it's so hard to do it. Because immediately the light gets shined on you. Well, what were you wearing? What did you say? What did you look like? You wanted it. So you already have to cross all those hurdles to come forward. And now in this case, you got to cross all those hurdles, plus you're dealing with someone with followers that are into the millions. And who are you? And the risk for Jane Doe and Jane Does to come forward is enormous. They have everything to lose, and they're welcoming a microscope of scrutiny upon their lives for something that they're a victim to. So what does she have to gain? What do they have to gain? They gain nothing and they lose everything. And I don't think people have actually done the math on that. It's tragic.
Yeah. one dynamic that I noticed that goes along with this is that when there were questions about women interacting with Mike, me included, kind of blamed the woman. Right? So there's different women that have this unusual access to Mike. We'll just say that. And I personally observed numerous ones of these, and I would always excuse in my mind, absolutely Mike would never be involved in anything inappropriate. Right. So gosh, she must be a little bit obsessed. Right. She must be a little bit off. Yep. And like this
you go to mental instability so quickly.
Yeah, so because I truly, with my whole heart, believed he was incapable of anything like this. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, tell me how you got into this situation.
So yeah, the way that my husband and I got involved in this is that a mutual friend, a leader, we understood that his life was blowing up. And we started to ask some real direct questions, and his answers to those questions were so alarming that we had the pastoral response that I think most believers would have, which is, brother, who's helping you? Who's helping you? Your wife is having an affair? Who knows? Who's helping you? Let's get involved. Let's get some intervention. Right. And the story starts to unravel that this is a deep, dark, gnarly web of stuff that no one wants to know about. And what I would now classify as spiritual abuse that he was under, to be silent about the destruction of his life was unconscionable. And as we walked through this process with him and hit brick wall after brick wall with most of our friends, again, these are, remember that Jono, when we're talking about the ELT, we're talking about our friends. Yes. We have labored together for decades. Some of my dearest friends. Yes. These are not those guys. No. It's us. Yes. And so as we start to try and bring this forward, we're just stunned that our beloved ones have kind of like this wall. One in particular said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything. And in the same conversation, this leader had told me that they were one of the top 3 leaders of the entire organization. I said, how can it be that this kind of weight should be on us and you would not even want to know about it? And so, but our heart posture was just of loyalty and love, and much like our brothers talking about the way that they came into this, we absolutely thought we would all be on the same team to deal with this sin and destruction. And as our friend's story unfolded, it became clear that, oh my goodness, Mike had some manner of relationship with his wife far before his son had an affair with her. And coming to that realization and trying to get anyone to care. Right. Just to care. So, Jono, I think one of the main, heart cries that my husband and I have had is the second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And as we watched this unfold in front of our eyes, our cry to all of our brothers and sisters was, how would you want to be treated? If this was happening to your life, Jono, what would you want me to do? What would you want me to do if I found out that someone had seduced your wife away from you? If I found out that you were in an apartment across town by yourself, and that just not too long ago your life was full of friends and children and love and leadership at the House of Prayer, and now you're alone and stripped bare in every possible way, what would you want me to do? And so that's how my husband and I proceeded with that as our kind of clarion call, the second commandment. And it wasn't difficult. That's how clearly right and wrong this situation was. There was a lot of attempts to make it very hazy and kind of like, who could know? It wasn't hazy. It was very clear. And so even though it gutted our lives and we lost basically our entire community for standing up for this, it wasn't difficult. It was so clear what needed to be done.
So Jennifer, one of the questions is, we're sitting here in 2023 and this happened for this main Jane Doe 20 plus years ago. Why did she not come forward before now?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. And it's a complicated one to answer because of the way I think we divide ourselves in our own soul and compartmentalize trauma. But you can't do it for your whole life. There comes a point where, you keep trying to put something away and put it away, and then the shelf eventually breaks. And I think that was Jane Doe's moment. The shelf broke and the trauma got unearthed. And I have a grid for that. Just my own story of having multiple instances of sexual abuse. And I was very transparent with my husband through all of it. And something emerged for me as late as in May, a 46-year-old secret that I hadn't even shared with my own husband. And when that came forward and he was able to help me define it, it caused me to go, oh, I get it, why people come out late in life, because I had learned to compartmentalize. You have to. That's what trauma does. You have to compartmentalize so that you can be a functioning adult. But in the mercy of God, there's a moment where light breaks in and freedom comes and the truth comes up, and it's worth the shattering of the shelf to get to the full light of God being, exhibited in the person's life and the story to come out. So I don't think it's late, it's the perfect timing. That's how I see it. This is the perfect timing in her frame, in her healing process, in her journey with God. God decided now's the time. And I concur, now's the time. And I believe her. And it's so courageous for her to come forward. And I know for some people that maybe haven't had trauma in their life, maybe it's complicated to understand that dynamic, but it's a real dynamic that memories just get pushed back, and then eventually they can't be pushed back anymore and they have to come forward.
We were asked, she was asked, why are you doing this? Like, what's your end goal? She had the most amazing answer. And I've had the privilege of sitting with this particular Jane Doe. She's not the only one, but this particular one, multiple times as she's shared her story. And there's utter consistency. And sometimes more is shared depending on the audience, but in the trust level. But what she said was safety for other women. Exactly. That is her goal. Yes. When she realized that it was not just her, right? That she was not just Mike's one dirty little secret, that there were others. That is what compelled her, and I think that's so noble. Yes. She's sacrificed her whole life and reputation now in order to protect many other women. Yes. And she has not changed her story. Right. She has not. It's a remarkably consistent story.
And we know that one of the Jane Does said, if I had known about these other stories, maybe my story wouldn't be what it is today.
Hello, we want to welcome you today to a very sober conversation, a living room conversation that I'm having with a number of our friends here. I'm John O'Hall. We have Alan Hurd, Wes Martin, and Dwayne Roberts here with us today. Now, for those that are not aware, we've all entered into a situation which has become a social media firestorm for sure, related to allegations about Mike Bickle. And there has been a lot of information, fact, rumor out there. And we just wanted to have a candid, unscripted conversation about the heartbeat behind some of the guys that have been involved in this situation and why they did the actions that they did. And so we've all been in some capacity for extended years in a leadership capacity at the International House of Prayer, have great affection through the years for the Bickle family, for the IHOP KC community. And we wanted really for people to hear our heart and why we've got into the situation that we've got into. So, Alan, I wanted to start with you. Can you give us just a rundown of the situation from your perspective over these past number of months and why we find ourselves in the situation that we do?
Well, Jono, I don't think any of us were expecting to be involved in anything like this. This is, in many ways, our worst nightmare. I mean, we were all involved in Kansas City from the very outset. I was associate director for nearly 20 years, president of the university for 13, pastored there for numerous years before I left to go to Colorado Springs. And it was a complete shock to me on that afternoon in June, at the end of June. I'm driving to the airport. I'm going to Israel to preach at a conference, and my 3 sons are going to meet me there, and I'm going to baptize my youngest son in the Sea of Galilee. And I'm expecting this amazing trip when I receive a phone call. And I had been, normally I wouldn't take it, but I just felt prompted to take it. As I was driving, I pulled over, and what I heard from a dear sister of mine that I'd known for over 20 years was a story that, frankly, I just remember when she first told me, I felt like everything in my body was seizing up. All I could do was just wail. You know, all I could do is just weep. My point is that probably for 2 months I begged God it wouldn't be true. You know, begging God. You know, because she, you know, what she shared there as a 19-year-old being prophesied to, that she, you know, of what a hero had prophesied to her, and how that led into the indiscretions, was so shocking to me. You're not, as a spiritual son, you're not ready to hear that. And I remember just weeping and saying, you know, I'll stand with you and I'll give you a call when I get back. And so I think the reason why I open with that is part of this, even as we engaged, you know, with the executive leadership team, we're all sons of the movement. We're all in shock. And I don't think we had the capability to investigate our spiritual father. That's not the heartbeat of it at all. But what do you do when you have a dear sister making allegations about a spiritual father and hero in the faith in many ways? How do you walk that out? And there's no playbook. There's no, how do you respect her and honor her sharing, and when she's ready to share, and when she's, as a survivor, is ready to tell these things. So we find ourselves in a mess in some ways because of the shock of it all, and then because of some poor decisions that could have been from the outset, to get help from the outside to really alleviate the pressure of all the sons and daughters going through the shock. I would have much rather been in a place to pray with my brothers and sisters, take communion with them, seek God with them as very capable people who have been identified in the body of Christ could come in and help us. And so I think we're in that situation in a lot of ways because of that. But I think we all found ourselves going into this horrific issue, confronting some real truths related to our leader and spiritual father that we weren't prepared for.
One of the questions that people ask is in relationship to, this is all out in social media and media at the moment. Shouldn't you have gone through a biblical process? So I don't know, Dwayne, if you could tell a little bit of your story, and is that a right analysis of the situation, that you didn't go through a biblical process?
Yeah, let me first just kind of tell how I kind of got into this situation, and my eyes saw things and heard things that for me I can't unhear. That's kind of just how I can't unhear what I've heard.
That's right.
So basically, August 1st, a couple came into our home and shared with Jennifer, my wife, and I this story. And I feel like in some ways the Lord had just preparing me to hear the story. And it was shocking. And I did not imagine that Mike Bickle, who I had looked up to and followed and been massively impacted, it was shocking to me to the point where I actually had to go back and apologize, because I didn't have a lot of empathy in that first meeting, because I was listening to, this is outrageously serious. And I was like, oh my. And because the individual sharing was a person of character to me, and I had to listen to what was said. And to me, that was kind of the process where my wife and I got involved into the storyline. And that now biblical process, what do you do when accusations against an elder are brought? And that's where I went to 1 Timothy 5, and I wrestled with that. And actually, Alan and I had a conversation around that. And we only have this one story, and so there's nothing that we can really move on. So, Lord, and so that's where I reached out to Michael Sullivan and Sam Storms. And I said, there's this allegation, it's pretty weighty, and it's a little bit disturbing. Would you listen to it? And I want to hear what you guys think. And Sam, it actually brought me comfort, because his beginning statement was, well, I don't believe it. You're going to have to prove it to me. And I found comfort in that, because I have great love and honor, respect for Sam, his position even within the body. And I felt like this is actually a safe place, because if he feels this, and then it's going to have to be a journey for us to discover what the truth is. And so it was in that process where the couple shared with the three, Jennifer was on the Zoom as well. And that is kind of, for me, what I would call the golden thread, because in her sharing of Jane Doe's story, that was a time then where Michael Sullivan actually said, I've heard that phrase, Diana's going to die and we'll be married. I've heard that before. And it was at a different time frame. And this is now, whoa. And that would have been late August and into September. And then that is when I feel like it was an orchestration by the Lord, where actually other stories began to come. And so that's kind of how I personally kind of got into this storyline. And I think that there's been a whole conversation, and maybe you guys can comment on Matthew 18, what's the process, the biblical process? And that was a conversation and a journey and a wrestle. How do we walk this out? And I think that is worth taking a little bit of discussion on. And what, in these types of allegations, what is the requirement in the process? And I think from 1 Timothy 5, I think that's where we've been living, two or three witnesses. And as witnesses and stories began to come and merge, that is where, okay, we actually now need to go to do something with this.
Wes, add your component of this and your journey, because obviously you and Dwayne eventually came together, but you had a different beginning point.
Yeah, I think I was more with Sam. When I first heard the story, I didn't have space in my mind to believe it, and I dismissed it. I said, there's no way. I mean, because the story isn't just a moral failure. The allegations was way more than moral failure. It was manipulation. It was using really sick prophecies about your wife dying and marrying a person. The age, at the time, Jane Doe was 19, Mike was in his 40s. And so when I heard this about manipulation, threats, intimidation from a pastor figure to, at the time, Jane Doe was 19, Mike was in his 40s, just the power differential. I didn't have space for that. Again, I remember, I was talking to my wife and I thought, okay, it's one thing to say that there's a moral failure and somebody slips morally, but this is a whole other category. And my 20 plus year of experiences with Mike, which I was just with him, this past summer in July, I couldn't compute. I had no ability to do that. I heard Jane Doe's story. I began to ask a lot of questions to my friend that had went through a divorce, that he was definitely postured by Mike. And then Mike preaches on October 20th. Again, you're just in disbelief that this is happening. And so we had heard, I think you referenced it, that when Jane Doe and her husband had met with Michael and Sam, and they were telling the story of this phrase that Mike would say. I think Jane Doe said over 100 times she heard him say that Diane was going to die, they were going to be married, etc. And when Jane Doe's husband went to Mike, Mike was at first denied anything, and then he said, well, a lot of people were using phrasing like that. A lot of people were having dreams like that, but it never meant it to be literal. It was just all spiritual. Well, Michael Sullivan said, I've heard that before from another woman. And so I jumped on a call with her, Dwayne did as well, and it was in 1983. And so in 1983, I think Mike in December, if I'm right, of 82, moved back from St. Louis to Kansas City in 83. In December of 82, he moves back from St. Louis to Kansas City. And this lady said in 1983, he began to immediately pursue me in a relationship that was the phrase he used. So yeah, I heard that straight from her mouth. Another person that we've all known for many, many years, a very credible person. And again, it was just another layer of spiritual I don't even know what you call that. Spiritual manipulation, prophetic manipulation, lying, coercing. It's sick is what it is.
There would be individuals that would come forth with that type of language that has been for years.
Yeah.
It's not just a one or a two. It's been said to several people.
That specific phrase was used by multiple people. Or we heard that from multiple people, that phrase was used in a manipulative way towards a woman.
And so that is the common thread.
And a few others who said they were being groomed. They're convinced they're being groomed.
There would be, I would put in the category, a lot would say that they had a grooming type, a being groomed relationship with Mike at different levels and kind of different levels, in the journey.
So it actually took me weeks to continue to wrestle, to hear more of the story. And then the story that Dwayne was referring to, where there was a couple that had went through a divorce, and I was a really good friend with him, and I began to even hear some of his story. He was a leader at IHOP, and the divorce was really difficult and hard, and the Bickle family was involved in that, and Mike was involved, and I began to hear some of the way that he was treated and the spiritual abuse that happened in that relationship. And these factors begin to help me to get my head around it. But to be honest, as related to Matthew 18, when Jane Doe's husband, decided, at the council of the ELT and at the council of, some of us, and him just wanting to do something with this information, decides to go to Mike and have a meeting with him. And then the way Mike responded to that meeting was, I think, when
When was that meeting?
October 9th. October 9th was when Jane Doe's husband goes to Mike. Dwayne, you were there that morning and attempted to meet with them as well. Mike resisted Dwayne to be a part of that meeting. That was another thing that I realized that he had done in other situations where he refused to meet with anybody but just the one person.
I think that's a big point.
It's a huge point.
It's a huge point because Mike's ability to communicate is quite powerful, and we all know that. But he won't meet with two people. He'll only meet with one person.
And I had heard that from, what he had done with my friend that was going through the divorce, a divorce in the IHOP world, just, years before this. I had heard that same thing where he had refused another senior leader to meet in the presence of this husband, which to me was just unthinkable. So when I heard that that's the way he responded to Jane Doe's husband, and then had the gall to put it in an email later on that day, and you read the email and it's just filled with indirect threats, intimidation, that's when I think that was my belief moment. It was in that moment where I said, oh God, there is another side to this man that has been hidden that I personally had never seen before. And I was shocked. And from that day forward, from October 9th forward, I was, to say all in as far as committing to my friends to stand with them to bring these allegations forward.
Yeah, it's really true. Once you've heard her, you can't unhear it.
That's right.
That puts us in this unbelievable place now that we never could have dreamed this up concerning Mike. And then October 9th happens and his email response. And then you're, oh no. Not only did what she say mark us, his response, it sealed the deal.
Right. And now we're accountable to that.
And now what follows on top of that, because he had been preaching on betrayal and false accusation for weeks, he goes after that October 9th and 10th and preaches on that Friday and spiritually manipulates, 2 million people on WebStream, because the big knock was Jane Doe is sharing too much as she's processing this trauma and coming to terms with it all. But if Jane Doe shared to 20 of us, on that night, he preached to millions.
Right.
And set a context of division.
Yeah.
And that alone, so if it was hearing her, being shocked and going, I'm not sure, I've never seen this side, then how he responded and lied to the husband, and then spiritually manipulated in the email. Then the third thing was the preaching on the Friday, and that was when I said, I cannot be silent. This cannot go on. And just so I agree with.
What did you do as a result of that?
Well, I wrote him.
Okay.
I immediately emailed him because I wanted to be able to confront him one-on-one. I live in South Florida. I don't live in Kansas City, so I could not even ask for a meeting. But I wrote him, and in that, said, went through my story of the anguish of coming into this, how I came into it, how I've been trying to walk this out. But after this week and after seeing you preach on this, I'm convinced you look more guilty than not. And for the first time, you look like a cult leader, honestly. I've never thought that or said that, but in that moment, it was the lowest point I'd ever seen. Mike, at that point. And just to go circle around, now that you know how we all came into this and how we all went, we believe this is true. Matthew 18 is really irrelevant. You would never send an alleged victim to their alleged perpetrator to confront them one-on-one. You would never send a rape victim to a rapist to confront them one-on-one. Matthew 18 is not the one-size-fits-all verse in the Bible for every situation. and the body of Christ, you can do a simple Google search and find out what situations Matthew 18 does not apply for, and the body of Christ will shout at you. It doesn't apply to a senior leader who has potentially abused a follower who was 19. Never. And most people wouldn't even recommend the husband go to him, because that's a good way for a leader to get shot, just to be honest.
100%.
To send a husband to confront, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
And for him to write in the email that send all the other women to him to do Matthew 18, it was so egregious that I didn't even know what to do.
I think it's important to highlight that Mike, in his history, has actually confronted leaders under him with the same allegation. And I think the premier one would be Bob Jones. And in that process, Mike did not make one woman go and talk with him. There was no Matthew 18. It was, I've heard these allegations, and they went and confronted Bob Jones. So that is what Mike had walked out in the past. And he's a template man. That's what he had done. So now to force this,
That's right.
and to force this issue, now you have to send women to me. That is absolutely unacceptable. And that does not work.
It was not required of the husband to go to Mike, but he did. And you asked an earlier question. Summarize why we are here now where we are. I just want to point out, if Mike would have confessed the truth to the husband, none of us would be here. If Mike would have then confessed and entered into a process for his brothers to gently restore him and walk through a period of getting to the truth and how deep this is in a spirit of contrition and humility, none of us would be here. That preaching on betrayal and false accusation, coupled with the black horse prophecy and the angel Gabriel, did great harm to the body of Christ. It set up this adversarial relationship of legitimate concerns coming forth would be now viewed as this demonic assault on Mike Bickle's chosenness before God in his ministry. That created so much angst, and we have never recovered from the lies. I've heard everyone want to critique the alleged victim, the survivor, from my perspective, and yet no one's calling out the lying, the lies, the manipulation, the spiritual abuse to paint this picture that created division.
And I think it's like, this is a huge point, that Mike, allegations had been brought to him. And he had those. And then he got up and he preached a message to sow confusion. He sowed confusion. And there's a part of me where I feel like the ELT leadership at this time are actually victims of Mike's manipulation and confusion. And so that is a huge point that I think the body of Christ needs to understand the storyline there. That Mike preached to me, an evil message when he had already had allegations brought to him that he denied.
This is a history of hiddenness. Even on this one issue, it's a 20-some-year history of hiddenness that led to a moment of lying when confronted, that led to a moment of the email, that led to a moment of broadcasting this horrific sermon on a Friday night that honestly I don't think we've recovered from. That tainted the waters of being able to get together, because I'm not a threat to IHOP. I'm not even a threat to Mike Bickle to bring the truth to him about indiscretion, because all of us here would want Galatians 6. We would want to restore a brother in a spirit of gentleness. But you can't do that without genuine repentance. Therefore, 1 Timothy 5, which is now you have to say it to the whole church so that the fear would come upon all.
So can I just talk about this? 1 Timothy 5, there's a narrative that there's kind of an orchestrated conspiracy against Mike and even against an IHOP. But Wes, for you, we all live in different parts of the country, different cities. Is this an orchestrated conspiracy? Were there other stories? I mean, we've talked about this main Jane Doe story, but for you personally, I know Brian, who's not here today, who is also not part of the group. We were all individuals coming at this from different angles. Tell me that story, because I think you were talking to Brian in that season.
Yeah. So to answer your question, no, there's not a conspiracy to take over IHOP. You know, I left IHOP in 2015. I'm in St. Louis, pastoring a church. You know, very grateful to be there. Incredibly healthy church. I've had great relationship with IHOP and even Mike up until this past summer. So I have no reason at all to have any angst to come against IHOP, to come against my friends that I've known for 20 years that are leaders there now, even Mike himself. So that idea that this is somehow some kind of plotted thing is just ridiculous. This is about standing with friends that have legitimate, credible allegations and then beginning to see your spiritual father maneuver, manipulate, and threaten and intimidate. And it's about, whoa, no, this is about exposing wickedness that is within the church, period. Has nothing to do with conspiracy. I'm in St. Louis, Brian is in Denver, Alan is in Florida, Dwayne is here in Kansas City, the only one living here in Kansas City amongst a bunch of us. So let's just, let that die. There is no conspiracy at all. There's no reason to.
In fact, nobody even desires ill will on IHOP KC.
Right.
Mike Bickle. We want the highest purpose that God has for them. But it entails the truth.
That's right.
Well, talk to that, because what do you want? Because I've heard people want money. They're engaging in cancel culture.
Right. No, I want the truth. What we have seen from Mike in these last couple of months now is somebody that has had a double life, somebody that has kept hidden, again, not moral failure. That's part of it. Way more. The ability to manipulate, threaten, coerce, and intimidate speaks of something that is within a person that is not fit for any kind of shepherding or pastoring. I want to see that exposed, because when that is not exposed, it just creates rot within the church. So as a shepherd of a body of Christ and within the body of Christ, I want to see real, genuine shepherding, and I want to see false shepherding exposed because of the harm that it brings to the church.
But speak to that, because Isn't this just one incident, 26 years ago that's under the blood? Isn't that?
Well, if we limit it to a moral issue, and that's where we try to keep the argument, which it seems that that's what their interest is, then I don't know. I don't know what I would speak to that. But this is much more than what we're speaking to. This is manipulation, coercion, threats, intimidation that is a shepherd with a huge platform is willing to go to lie and coerce. That is what we're speaking to. So when I talk about being exposed, it's exposing a liar. It's exposing someone who is willing to intimidate and threaten in order to, keep his position or to keep the secrets hidden. That has to be exposed. Whether it's 20 years ago, but maybe what he did was 20 years ago with this Jane Doe, but the lying he did 2 months ago on a big scale, which is, we got to talk about that. So that's the energy I have to see exposed.
That was so shocking.
Oh, I was shocked on October 9th in the way that he responded to Dwayne and Jane Doe's husband. I was shocked all over again on October 20th, on that Friday, when he spoke that message, because he explained about how he spent 3 hours that afternoon in the privacy with the Lord and how the Lord spoke to him.
A prophetic
encounter. And then even hearing whispers of the brethren accusing, how he builds this whole story about basically making sure that he's defended from this lie.
So he's on a global platform sharing that message, and I think we need to highlight in that in his famous notes, he has a date that he said was one of my very first prophetic encounters, and the Lord talked to me about betrayal. That date was actually the birth date of the main survivor that has come forward.
Of Jane Doe.
Of Jane Doe. It was her birthday, he highlighted. And that was received as a threat. And that is wicked. That's wicked.
Yeah.
And because none of us had ever heard that story before, and he's famous for telling his prophetic stories, and none of us had heard that story before.
Yeah.
So that was beyond
like shocking.
It was dark, and that's very serious.
To release, he said that the Lord had showed him 3 preemptive strikes against that, the accuser of the brethren, the spirit of accusation, the evil one. And he used Psalm 18, that the Lord would release tokens of heavenly storm glory against this assault. And he used Psalm 55, where David prays for his friend who was the betrayer to go down alive into hell, to Sheol. And so when I wrote him, it was, are you really praying for tokens of heavenly storm glory to kill Jane Doe? Are you really praying for heavenly tokens of storm glory to kill honest, sincere brethren who are coming to you with a legitimate accusation? This is unthinkable. Now, he might wordsmith that and go, well, I'm praying against the powers that are behind y'all. Really? This was another level. This was not, we are not betrayers coming. We are not Absalons. And I wrote him in that, and I said, you keep saying it's a Psalm 55 betrayal moment. I actually think it's a Psalm 51 repentance moment, and Nathan has showed up at your door, and you've mistaken it. Don't miss your window to repent. This is God's kindness. They're not Absalons coming to you. They're coming in the spirit of honesty and integrity and sincerity. And his response, I just, still to this day, I'm broken about it and don't know where to categorize that in my own soul. But it deserves to be looked into at another level. And it deserves the old guard in the body to come out and make clear statements on that behavior, because it's done great harm, great division, and made us to where we're at right now today, having to make this video, which nobody wants to be here doing this.
Right.
Not even and I think that the issue for me on Matthew 18, so none of us are in agreement that is actually the biblical process, but we
for
actually,
this circumstance.
Yep. But it's actually that's what was walked out. Mike was confronted by an individual. Then we attempted, actually, Wes and Brian Kim came into town. We attempted with Jane Doe's husband to actually meet with him, and he said, no, I won't meet with you. And that is when we went to a broader group of the ELT on October 24th. So we walked out a process. And I think at the heart of that, Jesus of Matthew 18, it's about pressure. And it's pressure so that they would turn and repent. And that has always been our desired goal, is that there would be repentance. And in the 1 Timothy 5 issue, going public, in the ESV, it has, if they continue in sin. And so to me, there was a continuance in his storyline of innocence, and he would not respond. And I felt that's why we had to go public. And I think we should talk to us that why Wes, Brian, and I made that statement on the Saturday.
Well, but before you get to that, just describe the tenor of that meeting on October 24th with the ELT and the relationship? Because these are all friends.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen some of them in 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and the same with Brian. Now Dwayne, he lives here, so it's a little different. You see these. You live right here in South Kansas City and see them. So yeah, we go in October 24th, 2:30 in the afternoon, and I think there was 5, 6 leaders of the ELT there. We go in, and it was awkward at first because they knew that the spirit of the meeting was going to be serious. So nobody kind of knew how to relate to each other. But Brian and I went right in and grabbed people out of their seats and gave them hugs and I haven't seen you in a little bit. And it was very cordial, very respectful. And then the meeting went, I don't know what, 2.5 hours. And it was very respectful. Jane Doe's husband read the story that was her story. And there was no defensive-ness. It was very...
No, it was
well received.
Very well received.
I mean, I would say the initial statement where Jane Doe's husband, it was about a 40-minute just conversation, and their chins were on the floor.
Oh, there were tears.
There
was no defensiveness.
at all.
A couple of questions that weren't, accusatory questions. It was just simply clarifying that point.
Yeah.
And everybody's guard was down.
Yeah.
There was no us, them at all. And we all embraced at the end.
Yeah.
There were tears. Yeah. And we actually left the meeting thinking, this is, praise God, because light is going to expose wickedness, to expose things that happen. We left encouraged.
But there clearly has been a breakdown in relationships since that point.
Clearly.
What was your interaction on the 9th with, you met with 2 members of the executive leadership team, and were there assurances made at that point?
From the Jane Doe's husband and myself, there was concern that the mode of operation was going to be walked out. And that would be where I was very unsettled. Mode of operation, don't tell people, keep it silent, and we'll take care of it. And that was...
You mean like, thank you very much?
We got
it.
Don't tell no one.
Yep.
We'll take care of it.
And I'm not even speaking to their motivation. I don't want to go there. But for me, that's what I was observing, and I was very, very nervous. And so when we move forward now to that Friday night announcement that was made, that's where I was uncomfortable, nervous.
And was there an assurance, or was that statement sent to you guys before that Friday night?
I think 10 minutes before the meeting.
I was told over the phone, it will be something like this. And so there wasn't the official statement. I didn't hear the official statement. So it will be something like this. And so that entire day, but actually even the day before, I had sent some text saying, if you come out, and it doesn't have to be very descriptive, but a strong statement saying allegations have been made, they're of, whatever nature, I don't want to even speak to that, but I said, come out with a strong statement. It will create trust. And transparency is the language in the hour, because transparency creates trust.
Right.
And I think at this time, and we actually said this in the meeting on the 24th, when we said we think our position is it needs to be a third party. I said that then. Yeah. There's trust in the body of Christ is at an all-time low. And if we're not transparent in a process like this, there will be suspicion from the beginning. And actually, ELT members agreed with that statement.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we brought up the fact that Ravi Zacharias has just happened. We brought up the fact of Willow Creek and Bill Hybels. And we brought up the issues that their boards and their elders, the mistakes that they made. And in the meeting on the 24th was cordial. This was a group of friends that are dealing with a tragedy here. So the goal was, hey, let's do this together. Let's work together. And we were, even offering articles from Willow Creek on mistakes that they had made, and if they could go back and do it all over again, these are things they would have done differently. So we were offering those as helps to say, listen, we get that we have no authority here to make decisions, and we're not acting like we do. This is information that we think is incredibly helpful. We're appealing and pleading, if you will, to not make the same mistakes that these other ministries have made that has caused distrust in the body of Christ to be at an all-time low. And it seemed to be very well received. There was no, hey, we don't need that. There was none of that. It was very cordial, very respectful. We left the meeting on the 24th. We said, hey, considering the seriousness of the allegations, the credibility of Jane Doe that we've all known for 20 plus years, this isn't some stranger off the street. We think that Mike should be set down immediately. Also considering the last 2 weeks of messaging that we've heard on betrayal, etc. No one even bucked at that for a second. Everyone completely agreed. Actually, one of the EL team members says, I was already going to do that. I was already in motion to do that. We asked that there should be a third-party investigation considering Willow Creek, considering Robbie Zacharias. This would be smart. We agree with that, yet we want to make that call, which we said, of course, we have no authority to make that call. Yes, we agree, you should make that call. And then we asked for no communication. So with Jane Doe and her husband, because there had been ongoing communication from Mike, we said, we think that's inappropriate, that shouldn't happen anymore. They agreed to that as well.
So what happened then? The statement was made on the Friday, and you decided on the Saturday morning to release a statement.
Yeah, actually, I was going to go Facebook Live, to be honest with you. When I heard the statement, I thought it was incredibly dishonest. Disgraceful is the word that I used. I actually texted one of the ELT members minutes after it was said and said that I was incredibly disappointed, and that if that was my wife that I brought into that meeting with friends that I've known for 20 years, and that's the way that was handled, I would have made a scene like our friend Dean Briggs made a scene. And I wanted, actually my wife Amanda was the only reason I didn't. I was in my living room with Facebook Live, just wanted to say it all, because I was angry, I was upset. It was good old Dwayne that made us all go to bed, because Brian was upset. Tons of us were upset. And you said, no, we need to sleep on it.
But I think the real issue is, again, we had a lot of people reaching out because rumors had gotten out. Well,
IHOP had even had meetings the previous 2 days.
Yes.
With different leadership meetings. And the meetings were incredibly vague. People knew, because we've been a part of this community for 20 plus years. They knew that I was in town. They knew that Brian was in town. My phone was blowing up, not with random strangers in the nation, with IHOP staff.
Yeah.
And I told them from Wednesday night, Thursday, and even all the way up until Friday night, I said, the leaders they know everything. That meeting on Tuesday was very cordial. The ball is in their hand. They know everything. And their answer to me was, they're not telling us anything. It was very vague. And so they're asking us a bunch of questions. So then after that statement came out on that Friday night, I was offended. I was very offended for my friends. And that's when we decided to basically tell our friends the truth.
But again, it was responding. We were responding. We did not have a plan, a thought. I never had a thought on Friday morning that the next day I would make a public statement. It wasn't even in my mind.
Right.
But the response that came back, and it was basically, we wrote that and released that to IHOP staff members. We didn't post it on social media. Now I will own this, that I released a statement in Brazil on the Friday night. I will own that. And actually, I've told the leadership, I'm sorry I did that. because that was my, in this process, that was wrong. I wish I wouldn't have done that. I didn't help doing that. And the reason I did it late at night, after we had talked, I didn't listen to my own advice. And I regret actually doing that. It was very similar to the statements that was made Saturday morning. But from my perspective, the trust level within IHOP that night was very, 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 very low. And that's from my perspective. And we sent it to people. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was a little naive. I did not think it was going to go everywhere.
No, I mean, I sent it personally to 7 people. We came up with the PDF statement. Yep. Brian sent it to so many. You sent it to so many. I sent it to 7 people about 10 a.m. on Saturday. And I had Julie Royce calling my home somehow by 3 o'clock that afternoon. And it was in the Kansas City Star by 4 o'clock. I never talked to any of those people. I shared it with 7 people that were all current IHOP staff because they wanted clarity, because the Friday night statement was just allegations, we're taking them serious. That was, and it was announcement number 3, by the way. Announcement number 1, prayer meeting here. Announcement number 2, hey, let's do this outreach. Hey, by the way, announcement number 3, there's serious allegations, there's allegations, we're taking them serious. That's what I mean by disgraceful and dishonest. It was disgusting. I was angry. Thank God that we did sleep on it. We got up Saturday morning. We crafted our statement of what we all heard on that meeting on Tuesday, October 24th. We crafted our statement based off that meeting. I sent it to 7 people.
And I'm just going to, for a moment, just be on the other side of the fence in regards to the leadership. I understand, I can see how they felt attacked by us.
Yeah.
And I can see how they felt, you haven't given us a chance.
Right.
And I get that. And it makes sense to me. And so they feel like we just hit them out of left field and this was planned and it was an attack. That was not our intention or our desire. And I felt, my perspective was, this is the mode of operation that Mike has laid into the culture. And to be honest with you, the Jane Doe and her husband, the fear in them that night, we have gone public, and now it's going to be siloed and silenced.
Right.
And he has got in the air this black horse thing, and we were responding to their fear.
And I regret on that Saturday morning not sending that to the ELT first, to at least let them know that, hey, just so you know, we are sending this to whoever it was that we were sending it to.
I as well. I think it's a valid point.
And we've all, Brian and I and Dwayne, we all wish we would have done that.
It's a valid point.
You mean if you would have sent it to them and with the concern,
no, not
don't silo this, or this will go out.
Just letting them know, hey, I'm getting ready to send this in 10 seconds, regardless of what you say. There was no, by that time, and for me personally anyway, there was no talking me out of letting people know the truth, because that's what it was. It was letting people know the truth on what we set through on Tuesday. Again, if that was my wife and I went in there and told my friends of 20 years what had happened to my wife, and I told her story.
And the story they heard?
I would have.
Yeah, we know.
It would have not went well. And so the least that I could do for my friend and what we set through was to tell the truth. These are serious allegations of clergy sexual abuse. It was sexual in nature, because that wasn't mentioned on Friday night. It was just allegations against Mike Bickle. We're taking him serious. That's all it was. No. We don't get to do that kind of pass with what we heard on that Tuesday.
Okay, Dwayne, I've got a question. One of the things which is being brought up in this whole situation is a 50-page document that is full of demands, apparently. Can you tell us something about this document?
Yeah, actually, it's just kind of as we were moving through this process, I had just felt, we just need to get, and others had mentioned it, we just need to get it all kind of on a paper, on a document, the timeline, just get it kind of organized. And so that was kind of the heart behind it. And so it was very much still a working document. It was not fully finished, in my opinion, by any stretch of the imagination. But as we went to those meetings, especially the meeting on the 24th, I had it with me, and I referenced it. I didn't even read from it. I had it referenced, though, that there's supporting now storyline to what the initial Jane Doe story had brought forth. And then it was, I believe, it'd be the next day, Stuart had requested it, so I actually delivered a hand copy to him and delivered it to him. But I think for me, you know, I don't have a world-class printer, so I printed it, threw it in a file, and then ran out the door. And then, you know, it turns out it didn't even print some of the important aspects of the document. And so there was never a list of women. There was in that document. There was never names. We did use 3 different people, and we used their initials. And it was just to highlight some of the storyline. But it was the initials of actually people that had given permission, and one initial they had not given permission, but the husband had. And so that was what was used. And I verbally said, I think there are other women that need to be looked at because they've had unusual access to Mike. It just doesn't make sense they have such close access to him. So that whole storyline, I think, has been confused. And those comments about the document, to me, are just not helpful from my perspective. I won't even be careful to speak to motivation, but it hasn't been helpful. That was a working document, and even all of the different people hadn't even read it. The different leaders, even, you know, these guys and then others had not even fully read it. Some of them had read a little bit, and it was a working document.
So what's the end of this, Alan? What do you want? Do you want money? Do you want IHOP to be brought low? Do you want Mike to be canceled?
Yeah, of course not. You know, I wrote on Thursday, before that Friday announcement, an email to all the concerned leaders, to Mike and to the LT, just laying out, you know, the hard spot we're in and the damage that had been done by Mike preaching on this. And that the answer of Jesus to betrayal was John 13. And that Mike had preached powerful messages on John 13. And that Jesus had a meal in the midst of his betrayers and turned them to one another to wash each other's feet. And I said, the whole world is watching the prayer movement now. Everybody knows the word's out, the prayer, they're watching the prayer people, the prayer folk, I think I said, to see how we're going to walk this out in righteousness and integrity. And I appealed to create a John 13 atmosphere of love and to begin to work together. And I appealed to them that sons and daughters don't have the ability to investigate their fathers, and they're here spiritual heroes. Because we were all in our 20s when we came to work for this global ministry with a global prophetic storyline of eschatological proportions and global revival. To think we have the ability to do this without help from a neutral third-party investigation, we just don't have the ability. And I appealed to them in that very email to let us do that so that then we can stay together as brothers. And then it all happened. And we've been on this, you know, there's levels of self-preservation, there's levels of lawyering up, there's levels of all kinds of levels, you know, legal ramifications, defamation lawsuits, civil lawsuits by victims, and we're missing the reality of the church and who the church should be and what the church should do. We have a situation of spiritual manipulation and at the least sexual immorality. and depending, and then wrangling over terms, whether sexual abuse or sexual indiscretion, it's clouding the issue. There has been mass violation and sin that has been hidden and covered up and could have other implications for other sin that we don't even know about, which we don't have the ability to investigate. But we need help, and we need to admit we need help. And we have all these wranglings and lawyering and this and that to cover up the fact there's been hiddenness, lying, self-preservation, and we haven't been able to get to the truth, which is we need to bring in what is acceptable, neutral, third-party investigation, where it's agreed upon by both the alleged victim and the survivor, or whatever term they're wrangling over now, and the IHOP KC ELT, and we need to be able to empower them, agree on the scope, make it transparent, and set it up for other potential victims, if they have, to come forward in a safe atmosphere so that we can all go back to praying together and believing together, because nobody has any desire to see IHOP KC. I've preached on 24/7 my whole entire life, all over the world. To imagine that I want to do harm to the very thing I helped build as the associate director is craziness. Yeah. Do I want to see Mike Bickle taken out? No, I want to see Mike Bickle's soul right before God and right before his brethren. I want to see the church work, and to act like there's no knowledge that the church has learned in the last 30 years with the Catholic abuses and all the ones we've mentioned. Yeah. No, there is a common group, there's common knowledge that we can enact that creates a safe environment so we can move forward. And so the craziness that's happened, we need to get back to the original thing, which is we need help. And I think in a year from now, we can all sit down and repent of all kinds of things. Like if we get into the minutia of which statement and this and that and this, the fact that Sam Storms and Michael Sullivan just released their statement should be a clarion call for us to get back to getting the right thing in place, not a PR campaign by somebody we don't even know who is doing whatever with a group of board members we never heard of. No, we need to get back to, as brothers, bringing in this third party, and we need to begin to pray and seek and ask for God to intervene for Mike's soul as more truth emerges. And we need the old guard who's been calling Absalons and nothing burgers and this and that. We need the old guard who should have stepped in to help us with this from the beginning to change their thoughts and jump into the modern era of the reproach the church has taken of this fact. The only recourse for sin of powerful leaders and charismatic independent churches is the public press. We ought to be grieved over this. Yeah. The fear of the Lord should take hold of us for this, that we don't have enough integrity to do the right thing and overcome basic self-preservation. The prayer folk didn't overcome it, which means prayer does not just correct organizational dysfunction and corruption. And we need a look in the mirror and come to terms as the body of Christ. We're not doing church right. We need help. What are the accountability structures? How are we handling power? How are we handling finance? If something like this happens, who does the ELT go to? Who's even their oversight? What's their board like? Who is the outside forces that come in? Instead of getting a call from an indiscriminate other leader telling me to stop doing things because they got it. I don't know if they got it. If they had it, why are we sitting here? The old guard needs a healthy gut check. Yeah. They need a gut check to seek God in the fear of the Lord if they're not part of the problem. I'm not saying I'm not part of the problem. I may be, but I am pleading for us to get back to the foundation. There's a man who had hidden this for over 20 years. He is my spiritual father, and I am crushed over it. I don't want any ill will. I'm actually afraid for his soul. I'm actually afraid of where he's going because of the pattern. And hidden this for over 20 years, and then lying when confronted, and then spiritual manipulating before 1 million or more people, and creating a divisive environment, and none of us have walked through it, and I'm sure we're going to have to repent of a lot of things. But my dear friends on the other side of the aisle, the ELT, I love them, and I'd like to join hands now and do the right thing. And I would love to have some old guard surround us and tell us this is the way. And I heard something from the advocacy groups actually said this. This is the first time when these type of allegations have come forth that any serious senior leaders have opposed the global powerful figure to call for the right process. Do you know how indicting that is? That broke me. I was like, God, like, what is wrong with us? We need to repent. And, you know, I'm glad that I'm considered part of that first group. I'm horrified that we're part of the first group. And we need help to come and do the right thing. And the spin has to stop. The lawyering up has to stop. And we have to get back to a church issue.
That's right.
Unconfessed sin, unrepented sin, lying, manipulation, some levels, massive level of sexual immorality, infidelity, not wrangling over is abuse. Is this really an affair or not? That's bogus. Real discerning church leaders know that's bogus. We need to get the church back, and we need help right now from our older brothers and sisters who have been there and not calling Absalons and nothing burgers. This is disgraceful. The church, this is why we need revival right now. It's an indictment to the entire prophetic and prayer communities that we were not able to deal with this. And we need help right now. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be overly passionate. I know it's the right thing to do, the PR thing to do, to talk real slow and soft. No, I mean that, like, this is like, we need to fear the Lord. We are not ready for the return of Jesus. The people that preach it aren't ready for it. And we need a return to Jesus in the spirit of Joel 2.
I think in the body of Christ, within all of the different streams, this issue of sexual sin has been brought to the surface by clergy within the last 5-7 years.
And the cover-up
in a significant way. And I think the SBC, that whole storyline, that is what we saw at Willow Creek. I mean, Willow Creek, I believe it was a 4-year process. Ravi Zacharias, it actually never came out, properly came out until he actually died, and they got access to his telephone. And it was when they saw his telephone that all of a sudden everything came out. And so this is the mode of operation. And the scriptures are very clear. Confess your sins so that you may be healed. And when I think about the IHOP 24-year journey, there's a lot of people that have left IHOP. And I'm not going to put a percentage on it today. A lot of people have left hurt, wounded, and in a bad place. And I want to think about those individuals. I want to think about where are they at today. And I believe that if we do not have truth come forward, and I think truth, like in the way I kind of picture it, there's a wound and there's infection at the bottom of the wound. And we've got to clear away the infection so that the body can heal and that we can see clearly. And if we don't call things out, name our sins at a corporate level, we will not find healing and then proper understanding of actually even confession of sins. And Sam Storms, he asked a group of us, please give me some collective wisdom. And it wasn't like convince me. He was just going, how should I write a statement and what's the purpose? And I said to him, Sam, the generations below my generation, the millennials and the Gen Z, they do not trust spiritual leaders in the body of Christ today. We've lost their trust. And I said, we have not demonstrated what it means to own our sin, confess our sin, and to them to be restored. And that to me is what we need to do right now, is call it out and model confession of sin, model what it means to be right with the Lord. And the leadership in this present hour is I hate to say it, but we're more concerned about covering ourselves. Our brand is more important than actually being right with God. And I got to protect the brand. I got to protect the name of the church. No, Jesus doesn't need to protect us. I mean, he doesn't need us protected. He actually wants to come and get us right. And I feel like confession, there could be a great redemptive story here if we would walk in humility, all of us, and the fear of the Lord. I want to be clean. I want to be, Psalm 19, I want to be clean. I want the fear of the Lord so that I'm clean before him. And that's what I am fighting for.
Because if that neutral third party comes, guess who's going to be investigated as much as anyone? Me. No. I was the associate director for almost 20 years.
Yes.
Do I want that? Absolutely.
Yes.
Because I want to be clean.
That's right.
I want to repent of anything that was unwise or sinful or harmful.
That's right.
It's the only way to move forward.
That's right.
So we're in the middle of this situation with the allegations against Mike Bickle at IHOP KC, and I'm here with Dean Briggs, John Chisholm. The acronym ELT, or Executive Leadership Team at IHOP, has been brought to the fore. And you guys were both part of the Executive Leadership Team for the past number of years and have recently stepped off. John, can you explain what led to you making that decision?
Sure. No, I appreciate you asking. I 2013 moved to Kansas City to come be a part of it. 2014 ended up coming on to the ELT in my different roles of leadership on the base. You know, my relationship with Mike goes all the way back 1989, 1990, 1991. I'm a vineyard pastor as the prophetic sweeps through the vineyard and Mike's relationship with the vineyard. So there's depth to all that. And so, member of the ELT. What's been transpiring, it's closing in on 3 years, 2.5 years. I've been involved with a gentleman who was a department leader for us, who all of a sudden found himself in trouble as it relates to his marriage coming apart. But part of the challenge was Mike's son was involved with the woman. And so then trying to help him manage his heart, but then trying to, like how IHOP handled it, how Mike handled it. And so the husband comes to me and makes an appeal, would I go with him to see Mike? And so I'm willing to do that and appeal to Mike and say, hey, we want to come and talk to you about how this is all being handled, given that your son's involved. And Mike was unwilling to meet with the two of us. He ended up, meeting with me one-on-one, was willing to meet with the husband one-on-one. And that conversation I had with Mike, didn't get anywhere. It was a very, I don't know. I sort of stopped it at the end of a half hour because I wasn't getting anywhere in terms of him understanding what's really happening and my hope about how he would get involved. And so again, we're talking about over a 2.5 year period, this keeps unfolding. All of a sudden, about 6 months ago, we find out that the relationship, after 4 years is still happening. There's 2 families completely destroyed out of the process. And so my frustration ended up with conversations with Stuart relative to, hey, I'm not okay with how this is happening. Those got a little bit, strained conversations. On the third one, it was like, I'm really not okay with this. And it's like his challenge back to me was, you have no idea what Mike is doing as it relates to this. You have no idea what I'm doing. And my pushback was, that's my point. Nobody knows. And so I just wanted to read this. This is the letter I sent to Mike and copied to the ELT. This is a very difficult email to write. There is so much dancing around in my heart. Here's the most important point I would like to make. You have created a culture that has embraced a do not talk approach to difficult conversations and church discipline. The do not talk rule is what people see most in dysfunctional families. I believe our ELT is a dysfunctional family, not able to talk about the problems around us because it would be gossip for them to be discussed. I believe a healthy elder group would be able to talk about the crisis, discuss the best way to approach the challenge to redeem, heal, and restore and implement discipline if necessary. Mike, your approach of I will only talk to one-on-one, your approach that I will not discuss with you, John, what I'm doing or what I have done, Stuart challenging me that there is so much that I do not know that is going on, but it cannot be discussed with me because that would be gossip. All of that empowers a world. We're 3.5 years into the process and we still have a disaster on our hands. The elder group has never discussed the topic. The elder group has never been informed of the problem. The elder group has never spoken into direction about the best way to handle it. Only do not talk. It's gossip. Mike, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. You are avoiding the elder group, bringing wisdom to what needs to be done. The letter's longer than that, but that was the heart of the appeal. And because of that, I just decided to step away. I was not comfortable with how the ELT was managing this situation that had gone on. Okay, so September 5th is when this is all unfolding. Dean's going to step in about September 7th. On September 11th, Jane Doe reaches out to me and asks to sit down with me and shares the whole story. And like, again, so many other people are saying, like, that's not possible is my response. You know, Mike's brand is so powerful. Brand is language in my consulting practice that we use all the time. You know, how people view him, see him, what he believes, how he lives. It was so powerful that my ability to process what she was saying, but over time, like, it just got in. It's just unbelievable what's transpired. And so I'm thankful the Lord got me out of the ELT as this is all unfolded.
Dean, September 7th.
Yeah, it's actually not September 7th. It was a couple days later for us that I submitted my own resignation, but I'll back up a little bit. I had felt like when I joined the ELT in November, December of 2018 that I was on a 3 to 5 year assignment. At the end of 2021, I felt like the Lord had made it clear that my assignment was ending and that I would take 2022 and phase out. I brought that to Stuart and Mike, and they asked me to just stay on, even in a minimal way, continue to be a part of the ELT, and travel, do what I needed, but continue to advise. Well, shortly after that, a member of the advocate group came to me, and it wasn't the advocate group at the time, it was just a friend. And they said, would you be willing to hear something that we're very concerned about? And we aren't getting answers from IHOP about this. And they told, this was within just a few weeks of that period in 2021, they told this story that John is referring to about an affair that Mike's son was having and the really, really questionable handling of that. Pastorally, a Matthew 18 process that had gone bad in multiple ways. And I listened, and so the issue is that department leader was actually in my department. I was head of messaging at the time, and he was in my department, and I was grieved to realize that this is someone under my care that I've never heard this story about. I had actually watched him deteriorate in his duties, in his capacity. He had become more sporadic. He wasn't showing up to work on time. He was obviously stressed and distracted. And so I, for a period of weeks, had tried to engage him around job performance. Is everything okay? What's going on? And he talked about trying to get his consulting business going, and finally said, I'm having some trouble in my marriage, would you pray? But he never said what it was. So then I attempt to resign. I'm convinced they make it easy for me to stay on in a provisional way. And then I find out that this husband is going through this crisis. So I call him and say, please talk to me about this. We go out for barbecue, 2-hour conversation, 3-hour conversation. He finally lays out the whole thing. My heart is broken. And part of it, really honestly, was I wanted to assure him, I've never heard this story. I don't know why the ELT hasn't been informed, but I didn't want him thinking that I, as his boss or supervisor or whatever, was just silently watching him go through what he was going through and not caring about it or trying to address it. So I got the information straight from him. I went straight to Mike and Stuart at the time, and the process began for me in a very similar way to what John is describing. I was told there's, 2 sides to this story. There's actually 4 sides. There's multiple guilty parties. Everyone has issues. There isn't actually sufficient evidence. They were confronted. The affair had stopped and nothing else was going on. People were changing. It's complicated. There's stuff you don't know. And both Mike and Stuart told me the same story. There's stuff you don't know. And I felt like, having talked to the husband, talked to Mike, and talked to Stuart, the fact is, there was stuff I didn't know. And if they were involved in it at the level they said they were, human relationships are complicated, it's tricky. I felt like, okay, at least they're in the mix. Honestly, personally, my wife and I, we were just grieving for Mike and Diane as parents in, watching their own son go through these kind of mistakes and choices. And we felt like the wise thing would have been for Mike to recuse himself, at the time not knowing more, recuse himself from the ELT's involvement on this. And within 6 months to a year, I get the principle I was told was, you don't adjudicate a private sin in a public setting. Okay, good. But there's about 5 other biblical principles that hold that principle in tension. And the ELT, as the highest governing board of the mission base, was never read into this situation. And I don't care how complicated, how pastorally nuanced, how difficult it is, the fact that Mike's son was engaged in this sinful activity and 2 lives are being destroyed, 2 families are being destroyed, both having ended in divorce now, and not even realizing how long it had been going on then. And over the next period for me of about 15 to 18 months, it's still going on and still going on, and nothing is being resolved. The ELT should have been read into that early in the process, and to find out that this culture of silence and the engagement only on a need-to-know basis. When I finally chose to resign, I still didn't know about the allegations against Mike. A period of a couple of weeks of really intense activity led to, we're in Ohio at my son's wedding. John, for the first time, he sends a letter to the whole ELT. He didn't read it here, but it's part of his resignation letter. And in it, he simply said, the black horse isn't gossip, it's perversion, and I'm not okay with this. The way this situation has been handled between these 2 couples, the silence, the appearance of cover-up, and the issues related to that, it's not okay pastorally, it's not okay organizationally, it's not okay managerially. And I held up the phone to my wife. We're at our son's reception after his wedding, and I'm like, Jeannie, what do you feel about this? And we both were struck to the quick. I had allowed myself for 15 to 18 months to be caught up in the fog of the nuance of all the moral ambiguities and the process ambiguities and the Matthew 18 double talk and the way evidence wasn't considered evidence and the degree to which this was made unresolvable and kept private from the ELT. That was the first time those names and that situation in 4 years had ever been mentioned to the ELT. And it just became shockingly clear. The elephant has finally been named in the room, and we aren't okay with this. I wrote a 4-page resignation letter. I read it personally to Mike and Stuart. At the time, I reinforced my own belief and confidence in their individual integrity and that they were trying to do the right thing, but I made it clear in no uncertain terms that pastorally and procedurally, this is a disaster. There is a scandal here that looks like a cover-up, and this has not been handled well and will come back to bite IHOP, and I implored them to do something about this and handle it differently. But I basically resigned saying, I have tried to stand on the inside with you, but I don't know how to stand on the inside when I am intentionally kept on the outside. I turned in my resignation. I wrote a 2-page letter, a shorter version of that same letter to give to the entire ELT with about 3 very strong warning dreams that had been given to me that were incredibly sobering. And I told Stuart, I'm going to print these and give them to the ELT. He said, actually I said I'm going to email them to the whole ELT. He said, there's a risk that that could be sent out in a way that won't be helpful. Would you please just print those and give them to me, and I will bring it to an ELT gathering and make sure they all know. To this day, I don't think that ever happened. The same kind of process of siloing people into sideline conversations to control the narrative and manage access to information. To my knowledge, all that ever happened, I followed up with Stuart and a couple of other members of the ELT. What I was told was that Stuart told each of them individually, Dean's resigned, his letter is on file. Well, that doesn't say anything about the nature of the resignation, the subject matter of the concerns, or the dreams of warning. I don't know that any of the ELT ever saw it. So I resigned, and 6 days later, I am read into this. I'm told, Dean, what we thought was a significant issue is now just the tip of the iceberg. There are women coming forward with allegations against Mike. When I was told what those allegations were, I told Dwayne in particular, I said, if I'm going to be a part of this, I need to speak to each of them individually. I wanted my own 1 Timothy 5 process. I'm not going to accept your word. I need to know how these allegations emerged, and I need to ascertain the credibility of them for myself. I spoke to the husband of, I already knew the story of the husband who his marriage has been destroyed as a result of this. And the truth is that Mike had 6 years of very questionable interaction with his wife prior to Mike's son having an affair with his wife. So that man, in double fashion, was destroyed by Mike's influence on his wife and his son's affair with his wife. That's a problem. And then I went to the main Jane Doe, and then with permission from the third person who, in the document that was presented, there were 3 that were willing to list their allegations and concerns, and each of them gave an impact statement. And I went to the third, who I don't have a personal relationship with, but she gave permission to her counselor to verify to me. I got my 3 confirmations, and now here we are as an advocate group. John and I are in this story because all of us in the advocate group, this is not an official assembling of around a conspiratorial effort to accomplish something that we predetermined we wanted to do. That's outrageous. None of us have anything to gain. None of us have anything to gain from seeing a significant hero in all of our lives face this kind of public scrutiny over sins that he has committed over decades. If there was any way on God's green earth that this could have happened differently, I would have explored every possible option. I wrote a letter to Mike on the 26th of November appealing to him, Mike, please do not continue down this path. You know where this is going. You know it is a fabrication of the Matthew 18 process that you are clinging to in the midst of this by refusing to meet with 2 to say that it is illegally proceeding in public fashion. I appealed to him to come forward. He did not respond. He's got his lawyer. He's doing this the way he sees fit. But I believe that the advocate group, what has been called the advocate group, this is just a group of brothers and leaders and sisters in the body of Christ that found themselves confronted with 3 stories none of us wanted to hear that arose in spontaneous and uncoordinated fashion by victims who each thought they were alone in their own story. But as Dwayne said early on, once you hear these stories, you can't unhear them.
I do have a question regards to your resignation. Both of you have just said that you went to Mike and Stuart, and yet I'm confused because the story that we're being told now is Mike has not even been on staff for the past 3 years. Could you speak to that?
Mike was at every ELT meeting. And so, I don't have all my exact dates right. A decision was made by the ELT to stop the board that was in place. I think this is 2020. And so we could get the exact dates on it. But a conversation, Mike's going to come under attack as it relates to the woke and the left, as it relates to gender, sexuality. He's being a very strong spokesperson, standing with Israel. And so what we need to do is isolate him, take all title and all that if they go after him and sue him, they won't impact the...
The idea was a firewall between him and the organization.
So the board is disbanded. We step away from the agreement we had with the Evangelical Association of how finances are handled.
ECFA.
And again, why would you allow that? I look back now, but the issue is, again, his brand is so strong, he doesn't need the accountability, and so I go along with that. And so the board's disbanded. And so, Mike was at every ELT meeting. Mike's voice is by far the dominant voice on the mission base. Mike is at every worship leaders meeting almost in terms of when they gather. Mike is in any significant place where there's very significant topics, Mike's voice. And so in as much as he's formally all that, practically, he's never let go of the hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah, the issue to me that I have found myself, and I think we've all found ourselves doing, is once the fog even slightly lifts, you look back and you see things that were always there, but you didn't see it at the time. And so dots start to connect, and once the dots connect, you can't unconnect them. And so that decision that was made, actually the board disbanded. That decision was announced to the ELT, if I'm recalling correctly, because the board made that decision separate from the ELT. It was communicated to the ELT, and here's why. Set up a firewall. Mike was going to engage in more and more controversial conversations, and there needed to be a firewall of lawsuits in case lawsuits came against him, that it didn't touch the organization. And so in the process of that, I believe the 501c3 was reclassified under Forerunner as a church instead of Forerunner being under IHOP as a religious organization, because that allowed certain other additional protections in terms of the way those things are structured at the federal level. And it also allowed the ELT to become more the government than the board. And all of that was ostensibly presented as we're moving into more and more intense days with all kinds of social metric pressure and messaging pressure from outside forces, and this is necessary for us to maintain the purity of the movement. Looking back now, the problem is that timing was right when the intensity, roughly the first year of his son's affair, was heating up, which none of us knew, except a couple. The ELT was read in one person at a time. If I had not been told and gone to them, I don't think to this day I would have ever known, because it was only on a need-to-know basis. And now I look back, some of those dots, I was outside walking with Mike one day in the back parking lot, because sometimes when he wanted to talk, we've all done it, you pace. And this was before I knew the situation. Any of this, before I had tried to resign, and I saw the husband who was going through this challenge. I hadn't yet met with him. I didn't yet know his story, but I was concerned for him because I'd seen his work deteriorate. He was leaving. He was walking out to his car. I'm walking with Mike, and I yell at him, say, hey, I'm not going to say his name. I yell, say, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? Let's get together sometime soon. I'm just trying to stay involved in his life. He gets in his car, drives away. Mike and I keep walking, but Mike shifts the conversation. He says, so you know, I know you know he works for you, but are you aware of what's happening? I said, I just know he just recently told me his marriage is in trouble, and I'm just trying to stay connected and involved to help him. And this is one of those things, I didn't know it. I didn't know that it mattered. But Mike said to me, you know what? He and I have a special relationship. Why don't you just let me work with him? You don't need to worry about it. Great. I mean, the man I admire, the man who has more wisdom, more integrity, great. If you're going to be that invested and involved, please keep the process going, help. And I took my hands off of it. Then I found out the issue. Then I went to he and Stuart. Then I got the circle. And I just held on to that. I thought, even then I thought, that is a strange thing to say to me in light of what I am finding out. And by the time it was all unraveled and the implications of Mike's own relationship with that man's wife and where it has gone since, there are too many dots to connect at this point that are suggestive, circumstantial, and secondary, but they still matter in the total picture of what is unfolding.
So when I resigned, I was not aware that any board existed. So that's in early September. You know, it's come up now that there's a board in place and all that, and where it appeared and when it appeared. When I resigned, I was not familiar.
And in terms of the official documentation of that board, as I understand, there were 3 or 4 listed, and there's 9 now, and most of them have been added within the last few weeks.
That's what it seems like. The one last point, just for me, is I think there's some discussion related to the advocate group and the ELT, that the ELT is like willing to have this investigation as long as there's a fence around it related to only does Mike get investigated. And yet the situation we're talking about, it's much broader, you know. The Mike's relationship with the husband's, the husband's wife in this, the unhealth in that relationship over a 4-year period is just staggering. And it's a part, I mean, he's a victim as much as the other Jane Does are victims relative to what's happening. And that we're gonna just isolate like this one point out when it's woven into so much stuff.
Well, that's actually an important point. Part of the reason John and I are where we are and what we're doing is because as the most recent two, that the advocate group is made up of all former ELT members spanning 20 plus years. People with a lot more history than John and I, but John and I are the most recent 2 members of the ELT with the most recent series of events to observe. And the sad thing is that particular incident becomes a proxy that's almost a proof case of how things get handled or not handled or mishandled, and the way it's explained away, and this kind of biblical rhetoric that is applied so that even in the reporting of these events, what I have seen over and over is statements that are technically true and entirely misleading. And that has become a way to manage the narrative. And the ELT is actually encouraged in how we lead, because there's always crisis, there's always managerial issues. And part of how you succeed at the ELT level is proving effective in managing narrative, so that you can go in when there's an issue and there's a blow up, a relational thing or whatever, or there's an offense or a complaint, and you manage the narrative to get everyone to dial down their concern and to stay in a compliant Sermon on the Mount lifestyle. I get it. I appreciate that value, but I think it has been applied in a controlling and manipulative way to the point that the whole culture is infected with it.